Have you ever felt the crushing weight of humiliation? That terrible moment when laughter becomes a weapon, turning hallways into battlefields and classrooms into chambers of torment? Today's story delves into that very pain, but carries within it a radical truth about forgiveness that might just change how you see the world and those who wound you most deeply. Michael Bennett clutched his worn Bible tighter against his chest as the hallway seemed to narrow before him. At 13, he was small for his age, his brown hair falling across anxious eyes that darted from locker to locker. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made the corridor of Westlake Middle School feel like a gauntlet he had to survive rather than simply walk through. "There he goes, Bible boy!" The voice ricocheted off metal lockers, followed by snickering that felt like tiny daggers in Michael's back. He kept walking, shoulders hunched, the Bible his only shield. His grandfather had given it to him before passing away last year, leather-bound with gold-leaf pages and his name embossed in fading script on the cover. Michael had read it cover to cover twice already, finding comfort in words that spoke of a different kind of strength than the one valued in these hallways. The footsteps behind him quickened. He knew who they belonged to without turning around. Dominic Russo, 8th grade basketball star, son of the town's most successful business owner and the architect of Michael's daily misery. "Hey, Bible boy! Got a scripture for today?" Dominic's voice dripped with mockery. Taller by at least 6 inches, with dark curly hair and the confident stance of someone who had never known what it felt like to be afraid, he circled around to block Michael's path. 5 other boys flanked him like sentries, a wall of denim, sneakers, and privilege. Michael's eyes remained fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. "I need to get to class, Dominic." "Oh, he speaks!" Dominic pressed a hand against Michael's shoulder, pushing him back a step. "Come on, preach something. That's what you Christians do, right? Tell everyone else how to live." Michael could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. His father's words from that morning echoed in his mind. "Stand tall, son. Your faith isn't something to hide." But standing tall seemed impossible when your knees were shaking. I don't preach to anyone," Michael stammered, aware of other students slowing to watch. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious, but none stepped forward. "What's that say?" Dominic reached for the Bible, his fingers brushing against Michael's knuckles. "Temple College, Northern Fields. What kind of Bible is that?" "It's my grandfather's." "Please don't," but Dominic had already snatched it away, holding it overhead like a trophy. "Look at this, guys, probably full of all those thou shalt nots he's always muttering about." "Give it back, Dominic." Michael's voice cracked, betraying the tears threatening to spill. "Please." The hallway had grown quieter now. Even those who normally hurried past had stopped to witness the drama unfolding. Among them stood Ms. Patterson, the young English teacher known for her kindness, watching with an unreadable expression from her classroom doorway. "Or what?" Dominic flipped through the pages roughly. "You'll pray for me? Tell Jesus to strike me down?" "No," Michael whispered. "That's not what I believe." "Then what do you believe, Bible boy?" Dominic stepped closer, his breath hot against Michael's face. "Because from where I'm standing, all that faith stuff doesn't seem to be doing you much good." Something shifted in Michael then, not courage exactly, but a stillness that came from somewhere deeper. "I believe that you're more than this, Dominic. More than a bully." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For a brief moment, something flickered across Dominic's face, surprise perhaps, or a flash of recognition that cut through his carefully constructed armor. Then it was gone, replaced by a hardened smirk. "Well, your beliefs are wrong." With a casual flick of his wrist, Dominic tossed the Bible to the floor. The sound it made, a dull thud followed by the whisper of pages splaying open, seemed to echo in the silence that had fallen over the hallway. "Oops." Dominic's smile never reached his eyes. "Guess God didn't catch that one." Michael knelt slowly, gathering the precious book, smoothing bent pages with trembling fingers. A small photograph slipped out, his grandfather in his navy uniform, smiling beside a much younger Michael. He tucked it carefully back between the pages. "Pick on someone your own size, Russo." The voice came from behind the group, clear and firm. Jessica Chen, student council president and the only person who seemed immune to Dominic's intimidation, pushed through the circle of onlookers. With her straight black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that missed nothing, she was as respected as she was feared for her unflinching honesty. "Mind your own business, Chen," Dominic muttered, but he took a half-step back. "Bullying a kid in front of 20 witnesses is everyone's business," Jessica replied coolly. "Principal Warren would think so too." The bell rang then, its shrill tone breaking the tension. Students began to scatter, suddenly remembering appointments with algebra and chemistry. "Whatever," Dominic shrugged, nodding to his friends. "Bible boy's not worth detention anyway." As they sauntered away, Jessica helped Michael gather the last of his scattered notes that had been tucked inside the Bible. "You should report him," she said, handing him a page covered with his neat handwriting. "This has been going on all semester." Michael shook his head. "It would only make things worse." He carefully reordered the pages, checking for any new damage to the already well-worn book. "Standing up to bullies makes things better, not worse," Jessica insisted. "That's what Ms. Patterson taught us in that workshop last month." "Maybe for some people." Michael attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks anyway." Jessica studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. But no one deserves to be treated like that." As she walked away, Michael noticed Ms. Patterson still watching from her doorway, a thoughtful expression on her face. She gave him a small nod before turning back to her classroom. That night, sitting at his desk beneath the glow of a single lamp, Michael opened his prayer journal. He'd started keeping it after his grandfather's funeral, finding that writing his prayers sometimes made them feel more concrete, more real. The pages were filled with his hopes, fears, and questions, conversations with God that he couldn't share with anyone else. "October 3rd, he wrote at the top of a fresh page. "Dear God, I don't understand why you let things like today happen. I tried to be strong, to stand tall, like Dad says, but all I felt was small. Dominic humiliated me in front of everyone again. He called me Bible boy and threw Grandpa's Bible on the floor. The binding is a little more loose now. I tried to fix it, but I'm afraid it might fall apart someday. Dad says I should pray for my enemies, but it's hard to pray for Dominic when all I want is for him to leave me alone. Or maybe to know what it feels like to be scared and alone, like I am every day. Is it wrong to want that, to want him to understand how much it hurts? I'm trying to forgive him like you would, but I don't know how. It doesn't seem fair that he gets to hurt people and nothing happens to him. Please help me find a way to make it stop without becoming like him. Amen." Michael closed the journal and slid it into his desk drawer. Through the thin wall separating his room from the kitchen, he could hear his parents talking in hushed tones. They'd noticed the new crease in the Bible's cover when he'd taken it out at dinner for their nightly reading. He'd told them he'd dropped it, unable to bring himself to add to their worries. His father's hours at the factory had been cut back, and his mother had taken on extra shifts at the hospital. The last thing they needed was another problem they couldn't fix. At school the next day, Michael tried a new route to his classes, taking longer paths through less crowded hallways. It worked until lunch period, when there was no avoiding the cafeteria. He sat alone at the far end of a table, picking at a sandwich his mother had made, when he felt, rather than saw, someone slide onto the bench across from him. Looking up, he was surprised to find Ms. Patterson, her lunch tray holding an apple, and what the students jokingly referred to as mystery casserole. "Mind if I join you, Michael?" she asked, though she'd already settled in. "No, ma'am." He straightened, wondering if he was in some kind of trouble. "I saw what happened yesterday," she said without preamble, keeping her voice low. "With Dominic Russo." Michael's stomach clenched. It wasn't a big deal. Ms. Patterson took a bite of her apple, studying him. She was younger than most teachers at Westlake, perhaps in her late 20s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and a reputation for being tough but fair. "It looked like a big deal to me," she said finally. "And it's not the first time, is it?" Michael shrugged, his eyes darting around the cafeteria to make sure Dominic wasn't nearby. "It happens. It shouldn't." Miss Patterson set down her apple. "Michael, bullying isn't something you should have to endure. There are people who can help." "No offense, Miss Patterson, but nobody can help. Dominic's dad is on the school board. His family donated the gym, and even if he got suspended, he'd just come back angrier." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Ms. Patterson was quiet for a moment. "You seem to have thought this through." "I've had time." Michael attempted a smile that came out more like a grimace. "I understand feeling powerless," she said carefully, "more than you might think, but I've also learned that sometimes the way out isn't what we expect." Michael waited for the usual adult advice. Tell a teacher, walk away, ignore it. But instead, "Ms. Patterson asked, that book Dominic took from you, it seemed important." "It was my grandfather's Bible. He gave it to me before he died last year." "And you're Christian?" Michael nodded, bracing himself for the polite discomfort many adults displayed when religion came up. Instead, Miss Patterson smiled. "I grew up in a Christian home too. My father was a minister." "Really?" Michael looked up surprised. "Really? And one thing he always taught me was that faith isn't just about what you believe. It's about how those beliefs change how you live." She paused. "Do you know the story of Joseph from the book of Genesis? The one with the colorful coat? Whose brothers sold him into slavery? That's the one. His brothers betrayed him out of jealousy, and he suffered for years because of it. But later, when he had the power to punish them, he chose forgiveness instead." She leaned forward slightly. "Not because they deserved it, but because he understood that holding on to hatred would only imprison him, not them." Michael frowned. "So you're saying I should forgive Dominic after everything he's done?" "I'm not telling you what to do, Michael. I'm just sharing a story that helped me once." She gathered her barely touched lunch. "But I will say this. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do when someone expects fear is to offer something else entirely. Something they don't know how to defend against." Before Michael could respond, she stood. "Think about it. And my door is always open if you want to talk." As she walked away, Michael noticed Dominic watching from across the cafeteria. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. For the first time, Michael didn't immediately look away. Instead, he held Dominic's gaze for 3 long seconds before returning to his lunch. It wasn't much, but it felt like the beginning of something. That night, Michael sat with his journal open, Ms. Patterson's words turning over in his mind. The story of Joseph had always seemed like just that, a story. But now he wondered if there was something more to it. Something practical he could apply to his own life. He began to write, October 4th. "Dear God, Miss Patterson talked to me today about forgiveness, about Joseph forgiving his brothers even after they sold him into slavery. I've read that story before, but I never really thought about how hard that must have been. His brothers ruined his life. They took everything from him. And still, he forgave them. I don't know if I can do that with Dominic. It feels impossible. But maybe that's the point. Maybe forgiveness isn't supposed to be easy. Maybe it's supposed to be something that only makes sense when you help us do it. If Joseph could forgive his brothers for selling him, maybe I can at least try to forgive Dominic for being a jerk. I don't know how, but I'm going to try. Help me figure out what that looks like. Help me be brave enough to do it. Amen." For the next week, Michael found himself watching Dominic in a new way, not with fear, but with curiosity. He noticed things he hadn't before. How Dominic's confident smile faltered when his father dropped him off in a sleek black car, the man never looking up from his phone. How Dominic's laughter seemed forced when his friends made particularly cruel jokes. How sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, a profound loneliness seemed to settle over him like a shadow. In English class, Ms. Patterson assigned a paper on personal heroes. While other students wrote about athletes and movie stars, Michael wrote about his grandfather, a man who had survived the Vietnam War, raised 4 children after his wife died young, and never lost his faith despite numerous hardships. He taught me that real strength isn't about power over others, Michael wrote in his conclusion. It's about having enough courage to be kind, even when kindness seems like weakness to those who don't understand it. When the papers were returned, Michael found an A at the top of his, along with a note from Ms. Patterson. Wisdom beyond your years. Your grandfather would be proud. That same day, Michael overheard something that changed everything. Passing by the boys' locker room after school, he heard raised voices, one of them unmistakably Dominic's. "Just leave me alone, Troy." Dominic's voice cracked with emotion. "I told you I'm handling it." "Doesn't look like handling it to me," replied Troy, one of Dominic's usual sidekicks. "Your dad made it pretty clear what happens if you don't make the starting lineup. And Miller's still outscoring you in practice. You think I don't know that?" The sound of a locker slamming punctuated Dominic's words. "My dad reminds me every single morning and night. A Russo doesn't sit on the bench. A Russo leads." As if I could forget for 5 minutes who I'm supposed to be. "Look, I'm just saying, Coach is making the final decision Friday. You need to focus. And you're spending too much time messing with that Bible kid. It's distracting you." "Michael. His name is Michael." Dominic's correction came so quietly that Michael almost missed it. "Whatever. Point is, your dad's already pissed about your math grades. If you don't make starter too..." "I know what happens." Dominic cut him off. "Trust me, I know exactly what happens." There was a long pause, followed by Troy's voice, suddenly uncomfortable. "Hey man, I didn't mean..." "Just go, Troy. I need to change." Michael backed away silently, his mind racing. The Dominic in that locker room, vulnerable, frightened, trapped, was nothing like the tormentor who had made his life miserable for months. For the first time he wondered if Dominic's cruelty might be a mask for something else entirely. That night, Michael made a decision that both terrified and exhilarated him. After dinner, he asked his mother for help with a project, explaining what he wanted to do. She looked surprised but pleased, helping him gather the materials he needed. The next morning, Michael arrived at school early, his heart pounding as he waited by Dominic's locker. He had chosen this moment carefully, early enough that Dominic's friends wouldn't be around, but late enough that there would be witnesses if things went badly. When Dominic rounded the corner and saw Michael standing there, he stopped short, wariness crossing his features. "What do you want, Bible boy?" The words lacked their usual venom, coming out almost tired. Michael took a deep breath. "I wanted to give you something." He held out a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. Dominic stared at it suspiciously. "What is this? Some kind of religious tract or a prank?" "Neither." Michael continued to hold out the package, willing his hand not to shake. Just take it, okay?" After a long moment, Dominic reached out and took the package, turning it over in his hands. "Why?" "Because I forgive you," Michael said simply. "For everything. The name-calling, the shoving, throwing my Bible. All of it." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "Is this some kind of trick to make me look bad? Get me in trouble?" "No trick. No cameras. No teachers watching." Michael gestured around the relatively empty hallway. I realized something. We're both fighting battles every day. Different ones, maybe, but still battles, and I don't want to be your enemy anymore." Confusion flickered across Dominic's face, followed by something harder to define. "You don't know anything about my battles." "I know more than you think," Michael said quietly, "about pressure and expectations and feeling like you're never enough." The words hit their mark. Dominic's carefully constructed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of raw vulnerability before he recovered. "Whatever," he muttered, but he tucked the package into his backpack. "This doesn't change anything." "It already has for me," Michael replied, "and that's enough." As Dominic walked away, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in months at Westlake Middle School. peace. Whatever happened next, he had chosen forgiveness, not because Dominic deserved it, but because carrying the weight of resentment had become too heavy a burden. Throughout the day, Michael caught Dominic watching him with an unreadable expression. During lunch, he braced himself when Dominic and his friends entered the cafeteria, but they chose a table on the opposite side, pointedly ignoring him. It wasn't until after the final bell that Michael discovered the impact of his gesture. He was at his locker when Dominic approached alone, looking uncomfortable and slightly defensive. "Why a watch?" he asked without preamble. Michael turned, surprised to find Dominic wearing the gift, a simple analog watch with a leather band. It had belonged to Michael's grandfather, one of the few possessions Michael had inherited. "It was my grandfather's," Michael explained. "It doesn't work perfectly. Sometimes it runs a few minutes slow, but it was important to him and to me." Dominic frowned, his hand moving to the watch face. "You gave me a broken watch that means something to you. That makes no sense." "It's not broken," Michael corrected gently. "It's just imperfect, like all of us." He paused. "My grandfather used to say that time is the most valuable thing we can give someone. I thought maybe it could remind you that there's more to life than being perfect all the time." Dominic stared at him, clearly struggling to process this unexpected turn of events. "I've been nothing but awful to you for months, and you give me something that matters to you?" His voice held genuine bewilderment. "Are you crazy?" Michael smiled slightly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just believe people can change, including me." He closed his locker. "I was afraid of you for a long time, Dominic. I'm not anymore. Not because I think you can't hurt me, but because I've decided not to let fear control me." A long silence stretched between them, filled with all the complexity of two young men standing at a crossroads neither had anticipated. Finally, Dominic spoke, his voice unusually subdued. "My dad's going to be at the game tomorrow. It's the final cut for starting positions." Michael nodded, understanding the significance. "You're going to do great." "You don't know that," Dominic replied, a flash of his old defensiveness returning. "You've never even seen me play." "Then maybe I will," Michael said, surprising himself with his own boldness. "Tomorrow." The next day dawned bright and crisp. Perfect basketball weather, as Michael's father would say. Though they rarely attended school sporting events, Michael had convinced his parents to come to the exhibition game that evening. He didn't explain why it mattered so much, only that it did. The gymnasium buzzed with excitement as parents, teachers, and students filled the bleachers. Michael spotted Dominic's father immediately, a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit, somehow managing to look both bored and intensely focused as he spoke into his cell phone. The teams took the court for warm-ups, and Michael watched as Dominic executed perfect layups and jump shots, his movements fluid and practiced. Yet there was a tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that betrayed his anxiety. Just before the game began, Dominic happened to glance toward the stands. His eyes widened slightly when he spotted Michael, who offered a small, encouraging nod. For the briefest moment, Dominic nodded back, an acknowledgement so subtle that anyone watching would have missed it. The game began with Westlake facing their crosstown rivals, the Jefferson Eagles. Dominic played with a fierce intensity, scoring 12 points in the first half alone, but it was his passing that truly stood out, precise, unselfish assists that allowed his teammates to shine. During halftime, Michael overheard two coaches talking. "Russo's playing differently today," one remarked. "Never seen him give up shots like that before." "Makes the whole team better," the other agreed. "Wonder what changed." The second half proved even more impressive. With 2 minutes remaining and the score tied, Dominic had a clear path to the basket for a game-winning shot. Instead, he passed to Troy, who had been struggling all game, setting him up for an easy layup. The crowd erupted as the ball swished through the net. In the final seconds, with Westlake up by 2 points, Dominic made a crucial defensive stop, sealing their victory. As his teammates surrounded him in celebration, his eyes sought out the stands again, finding Michael. This time, his smile was genuine. After the game, Michael waited outside the gym with his parents, unsure if he should leave or stay. He was about to suggest they head home when he heard raised voices around the corner of the building. "Embarrass me in front of everyone." The deep, controlled anger belonged to Dominic's father. "All that talk about being a team player is for losers, Dominic. Winners take the shot. Winners make the headlines." "We won, Dad." Dominic's voice sounded smaller than Michael had ever heard it. "Isn't that what matters? What matters is that Coach Brennan saw you defer to lesser players all night. You think that's going to impress scouts when they come around next year? You think that's going to get you into a top program?" "I'm 13, Dad. High school scouts aren't—" "Don't you dare make excuses." The sound of a hand slapping against the brick wall punctuated the words. "A Russo prepares. A Russo dominates. A Russo—" "Excuse me." Michael's father's voice cut through the night air, startling Michael, who hadn't realized his parents had followed the sound of the argument. "I couldn't help overhearing, and I just wanted to say what an impressive game your son played tonight, Mr. Russo." There was a tense silence before Dominic's father responded, his tone immediately transforming into practiced charm. "Thank you. Dominic knows he can do better, though. Don't you, son?" Before Dominic could answer, Michael's father continued. "Better? I've been watching basketball for 30 years, and I've rarely seen a young man with such court awareness. That pass in the final minutes, setting up his teammate instead of taking the glory himself, that was leadership of the highest order." Michael stepped around the corner to find his father standing tall, despite being several inches shorter than Mr. Russo, while his mother smiled warmly at a clearly uncomfortable Dominic. "Your son has a gift," Michael's mother added, "not just for the game, but for bringing out the best in others. You must be very proud." Mr. Russo's expression was difficult to read, somewhere between confusion and annoyance at being lectured about his own son by strangers. "Yes, well, we have high standards in our family." "As do we," Michael's father replied evenly, "which is why we wanted to thank Dominic personally." He turned to the boy. "My son Michael speaks very highly of you." At this, both Dominic and his father looked genuinely shocked. "Michael?" Mr. Russo repeated, looking between them. "Bible boy Michael." The crude nickname hung in the air like a confession. Michael's parents exchanged a quick glance, pieces falling into place. "Yes, our son Michael," his mother confirmed, her voice gentle but firm, "who apparently has been sharing some of his faith journey with your son." Dominic looked terrified, his eyes darting between Michael and his father. But to everyone's surprise, Mr. Russo seemed more confused than angry. "Faith journey? Dominic hasn't mentioned—" He stopped, noticing the watch on his son's wrist for the first time. "Where did you get that? It's not the one I bought you." Dominic's hand moved instinctively to cover the watch. "It was a gift." "From Michael," his father surmised, looking increasingly bewildered. "The boy you said was—" He cut himself off, apparently remembering they had an audience. An uncomfortable silence descended, broken only when Michael stepped forward. "Your son is more than a basketball player, Mr. Russo. He's a person. A good one, I think, when he's allowed to be." The boldness of his words surprised even Michael himself. Dominic stared at him with something like awe, while Mr. Russo appeared momentarily speechless. "Well," Michael's father said into the silence, "we should be getting home. Pleasure to meet you both." He extended his hand to Mr. Russo, who shook it automatically. "Dominic, outstanding game. Michael tells us you're in many of the same classes. Perhaps you boys could study together sometime?" The suggestion hung in the air like an olive branch. "Yeah," Dominic said, finally finding his voice. "I'd like that, if it's okay." He looked at his father, a question in his eyes that went beyond permission for a study date. Something shifted in Mr. Russo's expression. Not a dramatic transformation, but a hairline crack in a facade that had likely existed for generations. "We'll discuss it at home," he said. but his tone lacked its earlier edge. As they walked to their cars, Michael fell into step beside Dominic for a few moments, their parents several paces ahead. "Why did you come tonight?" Dominic asked quietly. "After everything I did to you," Michael considered the question. "Because forgiveness isn't just words, it's actions too. And maybe," he hesitated, "maybe I thought you could use someone in your corner for a change." Dominic nodded slowly, his hand unconsciously touching the watch. "I don't deserve it." "That's kind of the point of forgiveness," Michael replied with a small smile. "It's not about deserving." In the days that followed, a strange new reality took shape at Westlake Middle School. Michael and Dominic weren't exactly friends, but the bullying had ceased entirely. They acknowledged each other in the hallways with nods, occasionally exchanged words about assignments, and sat at neighboring tables in the cafeteria. The change did not go unnoticed. Rumors spread like wildfire, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Some said Michael had blackmailed Dominic with secret information. Others claimed Dominic had experienced a religious conversion after reading Michael's Bible. The truth about forgiveness freely given and cautiously accepted was both simpler and more profound than any gossip could capture. 2 weeks after the basketball game, the real test came. Michael was walking to the bus when he heard a commotion near the bike racks. Rounding the corner, he found Dominic surrounded by 3 high school boys from Jefferson, rivals from the basketball game, apparently looking to settle scores off the court. "Not so tough without your team, are you, Russo?" the tallest one taunted, shoving Dominic against the rack. "Leave me alone, Marcus." Dominic's voice was steady despite the danger. "This is stupid." "What's stupid is how you played all high and mighty in that game," Marcus replied, grabbing the front of Dominic's shirt. "Nobody makes me look bad and walks away." Michael could have walked away. Should have, perhaps, given their history. Instead, he set down his backpack and stepped forward. "Hey!" he called out, his voice cracking slightly. 3 against 1 seems pretty cowardly to me." All heads turned. Recognition dawned on Marcus's face. "Well, if it isn't the Bible boy I've heard so much about," he laughed. "You picking this loser's fights now?" Michael moved to stand beside Dominic, heart pounding but resolve firm. "I'm just pointing out that real courage would be walking away right now, before teachers see what's happening." "You threatening me, pipsqueak?" Marcus took a menacing step forward. "No," Michael replied calmly. "Just suggesting there's nothing to prove here. We all know you're bigger and stronger. Congratulations." The simple acknowledgement seemed to confuse Marcus momentarily. He had clearly expected fear or anger, reactions he knew how to handle, not this calm assessment of reality. In that moment of hesitation, Jessica Chen appeared, phone in hand. "I've already texted Coach Brennan," she announced loudly. "He's on his way, and I've been recording for the last minute." She held up her phone as evidence. Though Michael suspected she was bluffing, she had appeared too suddenly to have been recording long. The threat had its intended effect. "Whatever," Marcus muttered, backing away. "This isn't over, Russo." As the high schoolers retreated, Dominic turned to Michael with an expression of disbelief. "Why would you do that? After how I treated you?" Before Michael could answer, Jessica interjected. "That's what I'd like to know. Last month this guy was making your life hell, and now you're defending him." Michael smiled slightly. "People change. I have." He glanced at Dominic. "He has too." Jessica looked skeptical. "If you say so." She pocketed her phone. "For the record, I wasn't recording anything. But they don't need to know that." As she walked away, Dominic turned to Michael. "I don't understand you, Bennett. I really don't." "That's okay," Michael replied. "I'm still figuring it out myself." The next morning, Michael found a small package in his locker. Inside was a new leather cover for his grandfather's Bible, along with a note in Dominic's handwriting. "Some things can be fixed. Thanks for showing me that." Word of the confrontation at the bike rack spread through the school, but unlike most rumors, this one largely retained its accuracy. Students who had witnessed Dominic's transformation firsthand shared their observations with a sense of wonder that bordered on reverence. "I saw them sitting together at lunch yesterday," one sixth grader whispered to another. "Bible Boy and Dominic Rousseau talking like old friends." "I heard Dominic told Troy to back off when he tried to mess with some band kid," another replied. "Said something about battles we don't understand." The story reached the teacher's lounge as well, where Ms. Patterson listened with quiet satisfaction as her colleagues expressed astonishment at the unlikely alliance. "It's like a completely different kid," Mr. Reynolds, the math teacher, remarked. "Dominic actually volunteered to help another student during group work yesterday. I nearly fell out of my chair." "And have you noticed Michael Bennett?" Ms. Winters, the science teacher, added. "He walks differently now, stands taller." Ms. Patterson smiled into her coffee cup. "Forgiveness," she said softly, "is a powerful thing." The greatest test came 3 weeks later when Westlake Middle School held its annual talent show. Michael, who had always loved music but had been too shy to perform publicly, signed up to play piano. A hymn his grandfather had taught him, arranged in a more contemporary style. The night of the show, the auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents filled the seats, phones ready to record their children's moments of glory or adorable failure. Michael peeked through the curtains, spotting his parents in the third row. To his surprise, he also saw Mr. Rousseau seated near the back, checking his watch impatiently. Backstage, performers practiced last-minute flourishes and battled nerves. Michael sat quietly, fingers moving through silent scales on his knees, when he felt someone sit beside him. "Nervous?" Dominic asked. Michael nodded. "Terrified, actually." "You'll be great," Dominic assured him with unexpected gentleness. "I heard you practicing in the music room yesterday. It's really good." "Thanks," Michael hesitated. "Is your dad here?" "Yeah." Dominic touched the watch he still wore daily. "He doesn't get why I signed up to run the soundboard instead of performing. But he came anyway. Small steps, right?" Before Michael could respond, the stage manager called his name. It was time. As he walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinded him. He could feel hundreds of eyes watching as he sat at the piano, adjusting the bench, placing his fingers on the keys. For a terrifying moment, his mind went completely blank. Then, from the sound booth, he heard a faint voice, Dominic's, call out, "You got this, Michael." The simple encouragement broke through his paralysis. Michael began to play, his fingers finding the familiar melody that had comforted him through his grandfather's illness and death. The hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul," flowed through modern chord progressions and rhythms that made it both timeless and contemporary. As the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence before the auditorium erupted in applause. Michael stood bowing awkwardly, his eyes finding his parents' proud faces in the crowd. To his astonishment, Mr. Rousseau was applauding too, an impressed expression replacing his earlier impatience. Backstage, performers and teachers congratulated him as he made his way toward the sound booth. There he found Dominic, grinning broadly. "Told you," Dominic said, bumping Michael's shoulder lightly with his own. "You killed it out there." "Couldn't have done it without you," Michael replied honestly. "Yeah, right. All I did was push a few buttons." "That's not what I meant." Their eyes met in understanding that went beyond words. In that moment, they weren't a bully and his victim, or even two boys from different worlds. They were simply Michael and Dominic, two young men discovering that strength comes in many forms, and that the most powerful changes often begin with the most difficult choices. The following Monday, Principal Warren made an unexpected announcement during morning assembly. "Over the past month," he said, his voice echoing through the gymnasium, "our school has witnessed something remarkable. A demonstration of character that exemplifies everything we hope to instill in our students." Curious murmurs rippled through the gathered students. Two young men from different backgrounds, with different strengths and challenges, have shown us what it means to rise above differences and past mistakes. The principal's eyes found Michael and Dominic in the crowd. Michael Bennett and Dominic Rousseau, would you please join me on stage? Shocked, the boys exchanged glances before making their way forward. Michael clutched his grandfather's Bible, now sporting its new cover, while Dominic unconsciously touched the watch on his wrist. These students have created what I can only describe as a ripple effect of positive change in our school community, Principal Warren continued once they stood beside him. Their example of reconciliation and friendship across differences has inspired others to reflect on their own actions and attitudes. He turned to address the assembled students directly. Because of this, and with the support of our school board, I'm proud to announce the establishment of the Bridge Builders program at Westlake Middle School, an initiative to promote understanding, conflict resolution, and community service among our student body. Applause broke out, led enthusiastically by Ms. Patterson and several other teachers. Michael and Dominic have agreed to serve as our first student leaders for this program, the principal concluded. And I can think of no better examples of the change we hope to see. As they left the stage, Jessica Chen approached them, arms crossed, but a hint of respect in her expression. Bridge builders, huh? Pretty impressive. It wasn't our idea, Michael said quickly. Maybe not, Jessica replied, but what you guys did, whatever it was that turned enemies into friends, that was all you. She studied them both. So how did it happen? Really? Michael and Dominic exchanged glances. He gave me his grandfather's watch, Dominic said simply, after I'd been horrible to him for months. Who does that? And he stood up for me against guys twice my size, Michael added, when he could have just walked away. Jessica shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. You're both weird, but maybe that's not a bad thing. She turned to go, then looked back. The Student Council is collecting donations for the homeless shelter next week. Bridge builders want to help? And just like that, the circle widened. In the months that followed, Michael and Dominic's unlikely friendship became the catalyst for a subtle but significant shift in Westlake Middle School's culture. The Bridge Builders program grew, attracting students who might never have spoken to each other otherwise. Bullying incidents decreased, small acts of kindness multiplied. Dominic still struggled with his father's expectations, but Mr. Rousseau had begun to attend their community service events, watching with growing interest as his son discovered leadership qualities that couldn't be measured on a scoreboard. Michael still carried his grandfather's Bible, but he walked taller now, his faith a quiet strength rather than a target for ridicule. And the watch, that imperfect timekeeper, continued to run a few minutes slow on Dominic's wrist, a daily reminder that perfection matters less than purpose, and that the most valuable gift we can offer another person is the chance to begin again. 1 year later, Michael stood in the same hallway where Dominic had once tormented him. Now surrounded by a diverse group of friends, some from Bridge Builders, others from classes and clubs, he watched as new students navigated their first week of middle school with the typical mixture of excitement and terror. A small 7th grader hurried past, clutching a worn copy of the Chronicles of Narnia to his chest, eyes downcast in the universal posture of someone trying to become invisible. "Hey," Michael called out gently, "that's a great book." The boy looked up, surprise and wariness mingling in his expression. "You've read it?" "Many times," Michael replied with a warm smile. "I'm Michael. What's your name?" As the boy cautiously introduced himself, Dominic joined them, casually throwing an arm around Michael's shoulders. "Making another recruit for Bridge Builders?" he asked with a knowing grin. "Just being friendly," Michael protested, but they both knew better. The cycle was continuing, fear giving way to forgiveness, isolation to community, hostility to understanding. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but with a quiet persistence that transformed individuals and, through them, an entire school. And it had begun with a simple choice: to see beyond the surface, to believe that people could change, and to offer forgiveness, not because it was deserved, but because it was needed. Have you ever felt the crushing weight of humiliation? That terrible moment when laughter becomes a weapon, turning hallways into battlefields and classrooms into chambers of torment? Perhaps you have. Or perhaps you've been the one wielding those weapons, never realizing the wounds you leave behind. Either way, the power to break cycles of hurt lies within each of us, not in grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but in the quiet courage to forgive what seems unforgivable and the humility to accept forgiveness we know we don't deserve. That kind of courage changed everything for a bullied boy and his tormentor. It might just change everything for you too.